Welcome back to the Bro Show, our final college football video of the season.
Mm.
We're talking the national championship game and NFL playoffs here in this video, so a lot of content to get into. Chad, what did you think overall of this college football season?
I thought it was good. We talked about it last week. I thought that, that maybe there's some tweaks that could happen with the playoff seeding and stuff, but I really enjoyed these games. Every year, no matter if there's 4 teams or 12 teams, there's been blowouts. It's good to see some teams from some other conferences that maybe wouldn't have had a shot previously. And, you had some surprises like Arizona State. They kind of showed out. They played Texas really well. Most of those first games, obviously, like I said, were blowouts, but I really enjoyed the playoff as it stood. I think that the semifinal, both of those 2 semifinal games were some of the best games in a while. That Penn State Notre Dame game was big boy football. Those guys, that was a fun game to watch. I was watching from a phone at Duck Camp, but we were huddled around it like we were on pins and needles. It was a lot of fun to watch. And same thing with the other game. It was just solid football all around.
Yeah, I thought both games were really, really good. The Ohio State-Texas game, very dramatic, right? Texas first and goal from the 1 to tie it. Ohio State with a huge goal line stand, culminating in the defensive touchdown to give it a 2-possession win, but
Wild.
it wasn't that close. Like Texas literally, I don't understand why they didn't run 4 QB sneaks at the 1, but whatever. Yeah. That's why Sark gets paid all that money, and I'm just here in my apartment talking about these games. But it's been a great college football season. I completely agree. My Indiana Hoosiers were the best season in program history, and looks like we're going to have a lot of momentum building on to the next year. But one of these 2 teams is going to have the most possible momentum winning the national championship. We got Ohio State taking on Notre Dame in Atlanta, the national championship game. Line opened up at Ohio State minus 9.5, and it has settled now at Notre Dame plus 8 at the time of recording this video. Who knows where it moves? I said when the time the line dropped out, if it moved to Notre Dame plus 10, I would take it because it feels like way too many points in a very high caliber defensive game. We have an over-under here of only 46. These 2 teams are both 2 of the top 5 defenses in the country. So in a scenario like this, I feel like getting as many points is the best possible scenario. And I know Ohio State is playing really, really, really well, but I'm kind of leaning towards Notre Dame plus 8 in this game. Last year, Ohio State played Notre Dame in a really, really close defensive battle where Notre Dame, if you recall, kind of choked at the very end with only having 10 guys on the field as Ohio State scored with 1 second left in the game on the very, very final play. So Notre Dame, even though they do have a bunch of transfers in, namely Riley Leonard at quarterback, I feel like they're going to remember this game very, very much so. Marcus Freeman is really going to pound it in his guys that, like, we should have beat this team last year. They went out, they spent $20 million. We're here again. We get our chance for revenge. We get our chance for a rematch. Notre Dame is running the ball very well. Jeremiah Love had that beast touchdown where he was getting tackled by like 5 different guys inside 2 yards, and he still got into the end zone. And I think that with a lower scoring game with a low over-under here, I like the idea of getting points. I think Notre Dame is well coached. I think they're focused. Ohio State does probably still win this game, but I love the idea of getting more than a touchdown. My lean here is on Notre Dame.
Yeah, it's like you and I were talking before the show. I don't know where my money's going yet. Initially my thought was that Ohio State's the best team in the nation. They've been showing that pretty well. All their offensive weapons, between Jeremiah Smith, Tate, and Ekbaga, Will Howard throwing the ball. They've been playing really well. They've been moving the ball a lot. With the exception obviously of the Michigan State game where they kind of lost their identity trying to run the ball between the 2 tackles, but they have gotten back into their offensive play. Their defense still looks really sound. But like we said, that semifinal game I've been thinking about that a lot. The Penn State and Notre Dame guys, like that was one of the best football games I've watched in a while. And defensively, it was incredible. They were flying to the ball. They were hitting hard. They were making big plays, especially when it counted. Big 3rd down stops. So, man, I don't know. I think I'll probably lean with you. It's a lot of points in a national championship game where both teams are going to be up. Both teams are going to be playing, last game of the season. So I'll probably lean with you, but man, I don't know. That's a lot of points. So,
well, look at the Texas-Ohio State game, and you look at Jeremiah Smith, who's one of the best receivers in the country, certainly the best true freshman receiver. No disrespect to Ryan Williams, but I think Smith is the best. And he only had 1 catch for 3 yards in that game. Texas did a very good job at shutting him down. A lot of double teams. Texas plays a lot of zone. Notre Dame plays a lot of man. So I wonder if Notre Dame is going to kind of shift up their defensive scheme and play a little bit more zone, or at least go with that double teaming on Smith coverage. Because if they're going to single cover Smith with their man coverage, they're probably going to get cooked.
Yep.
So if they end up
Yep.
doubling Smith, maybe Ohio State is going to be more prepared for it this time. But I think that Texas kind of showed the blueprint of how you want to stop Ohio State's offense. Kind of take the air out of the ball, force them to run, force them to check down, and say, hey, listen, if Carnell Tate is going to get 100 yards and beat us, then I guess so be it. We're not going to let Smith cook us, and we're going to try to shut down Igbuka as much as possible. Notre Dame, Marcus Freeman is a defensive guy. He knows the best ways. He's gonna look at all the film. He's gonna see what the best ways are to stop them. And I do think Notre Dame's gonna have a very, very strong defensive effort here in this game.
Yeah, that's a good point. Probably wanted to kind of lean into a little bit more. Like, last week we said Texas is number 2 secondary in NCAA. Number 1 was obviously Ohio State. I think they allowed the fewest touchdowns in the air this year. Texas did. But again, to Notre Dame's point, of all the teams in NCAA, they lined up in man the second most. Over 50% of their defensive plays are lined up in man. And like you said, I just don't think that any team in the nation has the talent in a one-on-one capacity to cover all 3 of these NFL caliber wide receivers. So it will be interesting to see how they kind of manage the game and the game plan in that way. And if they try to line up in line or in man, I wish we knew that ahead of time. I would just hammer Ohio State, but I don't think that's going to be the case.
Completely agree. So it looks like we're both kind of leaning towards Notre Dame. And I personally also like the under at 46. I think it's going to be a low-scoring physical game, just like all of Notre Dame's games have been this playoffs. And even Ohio State on their defensive side, they have not let up many points to anybody. Oregon, they held to 21 points. Texas only to 14. And Tennessee to under 14 as well. So Ohio State's defense has been locked in. Notre Dame's defense has been locked in. I think it's a low-scoring, physical, competitive game. Give me the points with Notre Dame. Give me the under. All right, let's move on to NFL talk. Houston, Kansas City, first game. We have 4 games here to talk about as we have moved past the first round. Before we talk about these games, Chad, what were your thoughts on the first round of the NFL playoffs?
It ended up about like you'd expect. The only thing that and we'll get into this in this next, the first segment, Texans and Chiefs, was just the Vikings down the stretch, just unbelievable blow up. But, I think it ended about how you would expect, right? The favorites, I guess all home teams won. Yeah. Right.
All home teams except for Tampa.
That's right. Except for Tampa. That's right. But yeah, it's about the same. It was interesting, some good games, and a lot of them came down to the final, the final stretch, that the ending in the Bucks game where Baker put the ball on the ground. I mean, that was huge, obviously. Same thing with, the Eagles and the Packers. A couple of, questionable calls. You could call that in every game, the no call pass interference at the end. It was only going to put them within 1 score. So really not that close, but, some good games, I'd say.
It warmed my heart as a Bears fan to see the Packers just be absolutely horrible and see Jordan Love just completely shit the bed. Enjoy that $55 million a year contract on Jordan Love. But yeah, I thought it was a great first round of the playoffs. Maybe a little bit chalky, but there were two home dogs who outright won. One being the Rams against the Vikings. We were both heavy on the Vikings, but the other one being Houston. I was on Houston in the video last week. It seemed like the entire world was on the Chargers, but Houston came out and looked phenomenal. They absolutely blew out LA. I believe that was the biggest beatdown of the entire first round. Maybe, I guess, Baltimore over Pittsburgh, but from a final score result, I believe Houston's was bigger. But now Houston has to travel to Arrowhead, to Kansas City, where they are getting 9 points against Patrick Mahomes and the Chiefs. Where are you leaning with this game? First game of the day is Saturday, 4:30 p.m. Eastern. What you got here?
So we talked about this before, and everybody knows my record betting the Chiefs is abysmal. But this is actually, I don't know, for better or for worse, this is the game I like the most this week, and I'm on the Chiefs. Looking at the game, you mentioned the Texans blowing out the Chargers. Justin Herbert threw 4 picks, and the offense in total put the ball on the ground 3 times. Patrick Mahomes, Mr. Postseason himself, is not throwing 4 picks on Saturday. And the Chiefs are not putting the ball on the ground 3 times. And that was really, that's 7 turnovers, and that's the difference in the game. Obviously the Chargers scored first. They put 6 points up first. And then, the Texans didn't score in the first quarter. So They put the ball on the ground. Patrick Mahomes is not throwing 4 picks. And one of the narratives this season has been that the Chiefs are the worst 15-2 team that we've seen in a long time. And I think that there's some some validity to that. You look at there's 3 teams in the NFL this season that did not score over 30 points in any single game. And that's the Pats, who are 4-13, the Raiders, who are 4-13, and the Chiefs, who are 15-2. And you can say, well, that they didn't score many points, they're not as good. But they also didn't give up many points. The Chiefs still have Spags. They still have one of the best defenses in the NFL. And so I'm not going to put too much stock in how many points they've scored this year, because the Chiefs have a different gear in the playoffs, right? Like, when it comes to the postseason, Patrick Mahomes, Andy Reid, and this Chiefs squad that's been together for some time now, they just have a different gear. They turn the switch on and they play really well. They get to the Super Bowl and they win. So that's what I'm kind of expecting this week. I'm not putting much stock in that blowout last week, like I mentioned, for reasons of the turnovers. But the Chiefs are healthy. They've got Hollywood Brown back, Isaiah Pacheco's back, obviously, who's their number 1 back, who's missed a lot of the season, and they've had to revert to Kareem Hunt and others. So I like the Chiefs. I think that it's a large line, and I really think that's going to kind of bait some people into Texas. And I think for that reason, when you put Spags together with the defense, with Patrick Mahomes, their success in the offseason, and then you couple that with the Texans. They don't have Tank Dell, they don't have Stefon Diggs, and they've had some success, but I think that it's going to really show up in this game.
You mentioned Spagnuolo, you mentioned Andy Reid, but you didn't mention Matt Nagy, their offensive coordinator. I am a known Matt Nagy hater. You will not find anybody who is a bigger hater of Matt Nagy than I. He is undeserving of being even a water boy in the NFL, let alone an offensive coordinator, and let alone getting head coaching interviews. If the Jets are even considering hiring Matt Nagy, they need to fire the search firm that they hired and go to somebody else, because it's just an absolute non-starter to me. Obviously Kansas City has gotten the job done on the money line, but as you said, they are 15-2, but if their records were flipped in 1-score games, I think they have like 10 or 9 1-score wins this year. So now having to give 9 points when they really haven't been blowing anybody out is a little bit sketchy to me. I know you just said that it's a high number because you think it's going to try to trap people, but you also got to keep in mind that the sportsbook's goal is not necessarily to set an accurate number. They want to get equal action on both sides. And we know with the ultimate superstar players, the guys like Patrick Mahomes, Tom Brady, Aaron Judge, Ohtani, LeBron, KD, it doesn't matter the sport. Whenever those guys are playing, their team's numbers are a little bit inflated because the general public just wants to bet on them. They want to back Kansas City in the playoffs. They want to back New England in the playoffs because they say, hey, no way Mahomes is losing this game. And I do agree Kansas City's probably not losing, but I kind of like getting the 9 points with Houston. Houston was on a big skid to end the regular season, but they looked awesome last week. I know the Chargers turned it over a lot, but Stroud looked great. Collins looked great. The defense especially looked really, really good. And I look at this over-under number here of 41.5. This is a low over-under total. 3 points lower than the next lowest of this slate and 10 to 13 points lower than some of the other games on this slate. The books are basically expecting like a 24-17 type game. I guess technically 25-16 with a 9-point spread. And I think that probably makes sense for Kansas City to score somewhere between 24 and 27 points. So the question is, can Houston get to 17 plus? And I kind of believe that they can. I know that Spagnuolo is a great defensive coordinator, and especially in the playoffs, he steps up. But I believe that Houston is playing well enough. And I think that their stars, they got a lot of young talent on both sides of the ball. Anderson was an absolute beast against the Chargers, and the Chargers, in my opinion, have a better offensive line than Kansas City does. So if Houston's able to get that sort of pressure, they have some lockdown corners. I think that the defense is really going to carry the day for Houston. I think KC wins on the money line, but I will take Houston +9. All right, so we're going against each other there. Let's see what we're on here. Washington taking on the Lions, the second game on Saturday in the night slot. Another big spread here. Lions are 9.5-point favorites. But after how they dominated the regular season, how they dominated the Vikings, another playoff team in this Week 18 quasi-playoff matchup, it's not really too tough to see why they're such big favorites. You also have a huge over-under number in this game of 55.5. Jaden Daniels and the Washington offense is very, very high-powered. The Lions offense is high-powered. I think that this game is going to be targeted for a lot of points, a lot of props, and I don't necessarily know that we're going to see that. We know that defense generally improves in the playoffs. We saw that in the first round. A lot of these games were very defensive focused, and I think there were most games went under. I have to go look back, but I believe it was 4-2 to the under. And with being so many points here, I do kind of like Washington at plus 9.5. I know I'm taking a lot of road dogs so far, which is not like the greatest sign in the NFL playoffs. But I think that the Washington's weakness on defense is going to be made up for by their offensive strengths. We've seen time and time again that they will give up touchdowns, then go back down, and they're more than happy to play in shootouts. The Lions' defense is just absolutely battered by injuries. They have lost a ton of production and a ton of guys on the defensive side of the ball. They are getting David Montgomery back, but I think that will just probably lead them to probably running the ball a little bit more, which is going to bleed the clock. I think they're going to focus on Gibbs and Montgomery heavily in this game. I think Washington's secondary is probably a little bit stronger than their run defense. They don't have a great defense, don't get me wrong, but I think if you're the Lions and you're looking for the plan of attack, it's probably via the run game. So that should probably drain the clock a little bit more. We know that Daniels is going to run the ball. They're going to hand the ball off to Robinson and their other running backs. So I think that, based on the fact that we're getting 9.5 points in the game, that I'm expecting probably to be a little bit lower scoring than the 55.5 total implicates. I like riding Washington here. Again, I like the Lions to win this game. I don't think that a rookie quarterback is going to go in and beat Dan Campbell on the road, but I also didn't think he was going to go in and beat Baker Mayfield and the Bucs on the road last week. So I think that this Washington team is playing very, very, very well. They're very well coached, and I like the plus 9.5 here, especially with everybody wanting to be on the Lions again, just like everyone I think is going to want to be on Kansas City.
Yeah. So we're going to agree here. I'm on the Commanders. Like you mentioned, last week they go into Tampa and they beat the Bucs and Baker. The Bucs were fourth in points scored this year, fourth in rushing yards, and third in passing. So they had a really solid offense all season. And for all intents and purposes, the Commanders shut them down. They held them to 20 points, and they played well. The Commanders, in their own right, their passing defense ranks in the top 5 in the NFL, but the rushing defense is near the bottom. And that kind of scares me, obviously, with this Detroit team, with Jahmyr Gibbs, and David Montgomery returning, like you mentioned, because what team does it better between this 2-1-2 punch? Even without Montgomery, Jahmyr Gibbs has been outstanding since he went out. Obviously, one of the best rushers in the game, just dynamic, catches passes. He gets to the edge, he's gone. So that does scare me a little bit. But, last week, the Lions blew out the Vikings, like you mentioned, but Sam Darnold, man, he was a statue. What happened to the Sam Darnold we saw in the first 10 games of this season? The Sam Darnold that was moving in the pocket, who was throwing off his back foot, was throwing on the run. He was throwing incredibly to his receivers. Now, to be fair, he's got some of the best receivers in the league, in Justin Jefferson and Jordan Addison, but, they help a lot. But he disappeared, man. 9 sacks. They gave up 9 sacks. That's mind-blowing. And I don't think that's going to happen this week, obviously, against Jaden Daniels, who in my estimation is the wild card player of this NFL playoff season. Jaden Daniels is the real deal. He's been showing poise like he's a veteran, accuracy, sound decision-making. Like, you went back and watched that game last week. When he needed to, he threw the ball away. When he needed to, he tucked and ran and got the first down. When he needed to, they made play calls for him to run the ball on that crucial third down in the other territory to basically ice the game against the Bucs last week. So I've got a lot of stock in Jaden Daniels. I think that he's got enough, and I think that this team, along with Dan Quinn and their defensive scheme, is going to be enough to keep it close. Obviously, I think the Lions are going to win this. They're the best team in the NFC, but 9.5 points is a lot of points, and so I'm going to ride with you here with the Commanders.
Well, if you want to ride with us on Washington, fade us with the Lions, or take any action on your favorite teams or your favorite sports, go to BroThrow.com and use the promo code YouTube to sign up today. Get action on all your favorite sports. NFL, the national championship game, college basketball is in full swing, NBA, NHL, golf, UFC, boxing, baseball around the corner. Every sport, best prices available, plus 100 on every single over-under and spread. BroThrow.com/YouTube. Sign up today for free. All right, Chad, let's move on to the 2 Sunday games. Speaking of Sam Darnold, who probably cost himself somewhere between $60 and $100 million these last 2 weeks with his horrific play. I love the Vikings as a bounce back spot, but Darnold was, he returned back to the old Sam Darnold. Now the Rams advanced, even though they had to play on the road in their home stadium, right? They had a home game but had to play in Arizona due to the fires in Los Angeles. They get the job done. Now they have to travel to Philly to take on the Eagles. Eagles are 6-point favorites here. Who you got?
Well, on that last segment, I didn't misspeak, but I kind of pulled forward the Sam Darnold information, and I think what I was doing was reflecting on the Lions blowout of the Vikings the week before, or at least in the week before last week. The same thing goes here, right? Sam Darnold, we don't have to talk about it much more, but the Rams sacked him 9 times, which is insane. That's not happening this week, especially against this Eagles offensive line that is one of the best, if not likely the best offensive lines in the NFL. However, the Rams are hot, and that's kind of the same nod I give the Commanders is in the playoffs. When you're peaking at the right time, that's a good time to ride with them. So the Rams are hot. They looked well prepared last week. They came out with quick tempo. They scored very quickly. They moved the ball at will, seemingly. And again, they gave the opposing quarterback, Sam Darnold, absolutely no time to make decisions and move the ball. I noticed that the announcers were talking about how they were kind of moving up and like half stacking the box. Like they were not giving it up, and they were forcing them to throw the ball with no time. So I don't think that the Rams are going to duplicate that defensive performance against this offensive line. But I do believe that they've grown into a really solid defense this year. They started this season off 1-4, looking like they were going to give up and start trying to figure out what they were going to do in the postseason. And Sean McVay and Matt Stafford said, "No thanks. We're just going to go ahead and make the playoffs, win the wild card round, and go to Philly." And that's what they're doing. So it was interesting though, because I think that the Packers may have given the next team up kind of a script. When you watch that game, Jalen Hurts only had 13 completions for 131 yards. And there were a dozen plays throughout that game where there was absolutely no one wide open, no one even like open. So I think that if the Rams can kind of follow that script and play in a similar fashion that the Packers did on defense, I think that they're going to have a shot. So I certainly like the points here. I don't know about win-lose. It's going to be a tough environment in Philly. It's going to be snowing. It's going to be cold. And so, to that point, I'm wondering, is this going to be a repeat of the LaShawn McCoy versus Lions 2013 Snow Bowl for Saquon Barkley, where he's just out there just absolutely cutting it up, 200 total yards, 3-4 touchdowns? I don't know. It's not going to be as much snow. They're calling for an inch or two, but it's going to be extremely cold. But, on the other hand, my typical take in these types of weather situations is I like the quarterback who has the stronger arm. When you have high winds, you have cold weather, things aren't moving as well, and it's no secret that Sam Darnold is a much more talented arm than Jalen Hurts. But Jalen Hurts hasn't really had to have that because their run game has been so strong. He's had so much protection with his offensive line. So I'm kind of on the fence, but as we're picking, kind of having a harder time telling which team is going to be the benefit of this weather. I think I like the Rams. They're hot, so I'm going to continue with that trend.
You mentioned the weather, and I think that's actually going to be a big deal. The Rams, they play in LA, and now they have to fly all the way across the country. They've only played one team in the Eastern time zone in cold weather. It was the New York Jets 3 weeks ago, which is not necessarily the toughest competition the way the Jets ended the season. The Rams did win that game 19-10, only scoring 19 points. However, Matthew Stafford only threw the ball for 110 yards, and they really relied on Kieran Williams to pound the rock. He had 23 carries for 122 yards. The Eagles have one of the best defensive lines in all football. They also have really, really good young cornerbacks, and the Rams have also kind of made Cooper Kupp kind of a ghost recently. He has not been stepping up. Well, I don't know if he's not been stepping up, but whatever reason, they're not throwing him the ball. He's not getting the normal volume of receptions or even targets that we normally expect from him. And they've kind of been like a one-man show with Puka Nacua. I think the Eagles defense is going to be too good. You have Vic Fangio as their defensive coordinator, one of the brightest minds in all of coaching. I think he's going to be able to figure out ways to stop Nacua with either the double teams or brackets or whatever zone coverage he's going to do. And I think that the Eagles run game, as you said, is going to be so dominant in this game. The Rams do have a great defensive line, as we saw against the Vikings, but I think the Eagles offensive line has an advantage, and Saquon has been the best running back in football this year. I don't really care that Jalen Hurts might not do as well throwing the ball, because I don't even think they're going to need to rely on him to do that. Anything they get from him to either A.J. Brown, Devonta Smith, Dallas Goedert, any of the receivers, in my opinion, is just a bonus. I think they win this game with their defense, and their run game. And honestly, I think this one could be one of the bigger blowouts of the second round. I will take the Eagles -6 at home.
Oh man, I hope not. I hate the Eagles. God, I hate the Eagles.
Well, I was happy the Eagles beat the Packers. I absolutely hate the Packers, so maybe I'm a little bit rooting for them because of that. But let's move on to the final game for this video. Ravens and the Bills. I think everybody considers this one to be by far the best matchup of the second round, and the NFL certainly agrees, putting it on in that main event final slot, making us wait all weekend for this game. You know, the Bills opened up favored, and it has now shifted to Ravens -1. Who you got here, Ravens and Bills?
Yeah, like you said, this is the game of the year. I can't wait to watch this game. You know, all season, these two quarterbacks, Josh Allen and Lamar Jackson, been battling it out, you know, for the MVP. Both MVP favorites going head to head in Buffalo, and yet again another nasty weather game, which is postseason, baby. I love it. You know, typically in this situation, like we said, quarterback with a better arm, better mobility is going to get my lean. But both Jackson and Allen, when you look over the history of their playoffs and in cold weather, both of them are outstanding. Both with over 100 in QBR or I'm sorry, passer ratings in situations like this where the weather's going to be nasty, windy, cold, snow, freezing ice, all that stuff. So, you know, I don't have a lean there, but both of these teams both have dynamic running games between Derrick Henry and James Cook, who I think led the NFL in touchdowns this season, and Derrick Henry right on the heels of Saquon Barkley in rushing yards. So both of these teams are going to run the ball. Both of these teams are going to lean on their quarterbacks to throw the ball in this nasty weather. I think it's going to be a high-flying game. I think they're both going to score a lot of points. I've said multiple times on this show that I think Josh Allen is the MVP of this season. As the award is defined, I think he's the MVP. But Lamar is probably the best quarterback in the league this year. And he's followed by 9 Pro Bowlers backing him up. So I don't think it's odd that the Bills are now the underdog in this game. And the public hasn't really taken the bait so far. It looks like the money seems to be pretty evenly split where I look at numbers. So it's a tough one to cap, especially considering your Pro Bowl 1,000-yard receiver Zay Jones is questionable. Don't know if he's going to play. He likely will. But, you know, it's one of those things where I got to go to my feel, and my gut says I should pick the Ravens, but my heart says to take the Bills. It feels like this is the Bills' year. It feels like they've turned a corner, finally. Now, you could say the same thing about the Ravens. You know, they haven't gotten it done either. You know, they haven't won an AFC championship just like the Bills. So the thing that I'm going to lean towards, I guess, at this point is that the Bills have already proven that they can beat the Chiefs. They've already proven that they can beat the Lions, both of the 1 seeds in the AFC and NFC. They got blown out by the Ravens earlier in the season. And as we've said before, it's very tough to beat the same team twice, especially in the NFL. So for that reason, let's go Bills. And also, I have a little special place in my heart for the Bills. I feel bad for the Bills. The Cowboys beat them in 2 Super Bowls in a row in the 90s. And I just, ever since then, like, I just can't imagine being a Bills fan going through what they've gone through the last 30 years. So, you know, I'm going to ride with the Bills. I hope they win. I'm going to put my money with them.
200 yards rushing for Derrick Henry in the first matchup. Derrick Henry is a running back who thrives in the playoffs when players are a little bit more beaten down, their bodies are a little bit sore, the weather's colder, and you get a little bit tougher, being like, oh, I got to tackle this beast now in cold weather after I'm already hurt. So I feel like the Ravens are just going to continue to do that and pound the ball with Derrick Henry. But I also am on the Buffalo Bills in this game. As you said, the Ravens destroyed them in the first game. I think the Bills are going to use that as a motivation. I think the Bills are going to be able to look at the film, look at the fact that Henry destroyed them and say, how are we going to go all out to stop the run and stop D. Henry? You know, the Bills, their defense was pretty good, I thought, in the opening round matchup against the Broncos, but obviously the Ravens are a much more dynamic and better offense than Denver is. But at the end of the day, Lamar Jackson has kind of this reputation as being a playoff choker. And so far, the results kind of prove that. He has been the MVP before, and he has never even made the Super Bowl. And in this devastating matchup, now having to go to Buffalo, where their crowd is going to be absolutely insane. They even have the kind of, you know, no one believes in us. The line has shifted, all that, everybody on the Ravens. I think the Bills are going to be very, very feisty in this game. I think they're going to fight. And I believe that Josh Allen, as you said, is the MVP. And honestly, I think he's better than Lamar Jackson in this season, at least. So I'm going to ride with, I think, the best player on the field in Josh Allen. I believe that the Bills defense is going to bounce back and be super locked in. And I think the crowd is going to give them the final push that they need. Zay Flowers being out, as you mentioned, is absolutely huge. If the Bills do end up stopping the run, how are the Ravens going to respond through the air? They're going to have to find the tight ends. They're going to find some of these backup receivers. And I don't necessarily know that those guys are going to be able to push them over the top. We have a high over-under here at 51.5. So the books are expecting a lot of points. They're expecting this to be, again, like a 27-24 type game, which, given the weather and the defenses from these teams, maybe seems a little bit high. I don't see this game going that high scoring if the Ravens are just pounding the ball on the ground and bleeding clock. So that kind of leads me to believe they're not going to be able to do that. I'm going to be siding with the Bills here, +1 at home. I do believe Josh Allen gets it done, but I'm very excited for this game, and this should be by far the best game of the weekend. I would not be surprised if the Ravens won, but I'm on the Bills at +1, which means I'm on 3 out of 4 dogs this weekend. Very, very rare for me. I generally prefer to bet favorites, but hoping this round is going to be a dog round.
They say take dogs late.
Very,
That's
very,
what Brady
very true.
says. I don't know where he got it. I have no idea.
Well, listen, if Brady says that,
He's a mush.
I was gonna say if Brady says it, I might follow it. But
yeah,
that is going to do it for this video. We gave you guys our picks for the national championship and everything related to the next round of the college football playoffs. Chad, anything else you want to leave the viewers with before we end this one?
Nope, nothing this week. Just hope we have another successful week. We kind of finished the season somewhat strong between the two of us, but my emailer has been on a slide.
I believe I was
Not great.
3-1 in the video picks last week, with the only loss being Tampa. So I'll take it. I'll take it. Not too shabby.
Yeah, you texted me after the Texans game, free money. I thought about responding about the Bucks too, but
yeah, I couldn't believe everybody was on the Chargers. But hey, listen, I gotta brag where the wins happen. Gotta brag where the wins happen.
Yeah.
Anyways, appreciate all you guys for tuning in. The videos have definitely been getting some good views recently. We thank all of you guys for your support, and please leave a comment on your favorite pick for this weekend's games in the comments section. And let us know who you're riding with on BroThrow. And again, if you are new, brothrow.com/YouTube to sign up for free. We'll see everybody in the next one. Take care. Peace.